Ladies and gentlemen, no guest today, just myself, Dominic Schleter. And for one specific reason, this morning I'm recording this on February 24th. We released the 500th episode of the Running Effect podcast. The conversation was with Cooper Luttenhouse. A funny part of the podcast is like sometimes the people in the running world have the most bizarre last names that are very hard to pronounce. It's probably across every sport. I'm just biased because I'm in the sport of running. Besides the point, that was the 500th episode. And yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity for a little quick yap session and do a solo episode. I've actually never done a solo episode in the history of the Running Effect. Someone might have to fact check me. I've been at this for almost 5 years, so sometimes I forget things, but I think my first ever solo episode, and just wanted to take this time to reflect, hopefully give you guys some insight on where my head is at, what this means to me, as well as just have a timestamp in history that I can come back to, my future kids can come back to, of what was going through my mind and thought process 500 episodes in, because I know we're going to get to 1,000 and I'm probably going to be like, oh, I thought I was hot stuff at episode 500. Look at all the things I've accomplished since then. And hopefully I can get to that point. But I do just want to start out this conversation by saying thank you. Thank you to you for listening, for supporting me, for following the podcast. I always love meeting you guys, hearing about how you discovered the podcast, the impact that it's had. And if you're listening to this and you haven't reached out to me before, we'd greatly appreciate if you shoot me a DM or email and just tell me what the podcast means to you, how it's helped you, that sort of stuff. Always helps me have a greater understanding of how the show helps people, and then how I can continue to produce that type of content to hopefully help you further, but also help more people. And yeah, there's so many podcasts out there. I'm such a podcast aficionado. I listen to so many podcasts myself, and I know there are so many options out there. And so for you to spend your time on a weekly basis or every other day basis or monthly basis, depending on how much you listen to the podcast, means the world. I don't take your time for granted. I know you're incredibly busy. And so I hope this podcast has provided you value, that you've enjoyed it. I would hope that's the case if you're listening to this conversation right now and have clicked on this conversation. So thank you. I so appreciate it. And even though we're almost 5 years in and 500 episodes in, I think you are an OG if you're listening to this, because the things I'm going to do in my mind that I know will become a reality, we are just scratching the surface. We are just doing the small little things, growing the foundation for, I think, the masterpiece that will build in the years to come. And I'm so, so grateful and excited to see all of those things come to life. So thank you for being an OG. Thank you for your support. And I say this at the beginning of like every intro. You're probably grateful you didn't have to hear an intro this week. But the easiest thing that you can do to help me out and help support this show, if you are a loyal listener, is give us a 5-star review. One, that's like the cherry on top, takes literally 5 seconds. If you want to fact check me there, please do, but it does not take more than 5 to 10 seconds. And then share the podcast with a friend. Generally, when I talk to people and ask how they discovered the podcast, it is through the recommendation of a friend. And I've said this before on the podcast, but studies show that most people discover their favorite podcast through the recommendation of a friend. So as I always say, the Running Effect podcast could be someone's favorite podcast. They just don't know it yet. So again, a thank you to you all for listening and supporting. I've got a few points that I just want to run through today, and this will be a short episode, but just again, a point of reflection and kind of a timestamp on the podcast feed. It's truly crazy that I'm 500 episodes in. Absolutely wild. And I think why it means so much to me is because output in the things you can control are so much more important than the results that you can't. I can't control you guys listening to the podcast. I can't control how many followers I have on Instagram. Like, there are certain things I can do that I think will get me followers, or that I think will get me listeners. Like if I have a Connor Burns and Simeon Birnbaum on the podcast, I can assume that conversation will do pretty well and hopefully get more listeners for the podcast. But at the end of the day, I have no control over someone's behavior on their iPhone and whether they choose to click on my podcast or not. But what I can control are the things that I can control, which is how many episodes I produce, how many conversations I have, my own systems and processes. And so the number 500 to me, and doing 500 podcast episodes, is honestly more meaningful than like 1 million streams, getting on Spotify's charts, getting 200,000 followers on Instagram, making X amount of dollars that I have from this show. Because again, I can't really control the other things. I can do things that can help to control and influence the income, but releasing and recording 500 conversations, I can control. And I'm so proud of myself for that. And I think that's a big reason that I wanted to create this episode, was to honestly give myself flowers. And again, have a timestamp in history of like, yeah, you did 500 episodes. It's almost 500 people, probably over 500 hours of conversation, and almost 5 years of hard work. And that was what I could control. And again, to you listening out there, using a running analogy, it's like, let's say you want to break, or let's say you want to win a state title, right? And you're in position to do so. You can't control what the other competitors do on the start line, how they trained, how they prepared, what they're thinking, what their coaches told them, how they slept that night. But what you can control is your own process and your own system, and get yourself in a spot where even if you play second because someone just ran better than you or was better than you on the day, you know deep down that you controlled the things that you could control. You did everything in your power to win a state championship. You did the level that it took to win a state championship, and it just didn't happen, but you can still be proud of yourself because again, you can control your output and you can control the things that you do. Another thing I wanted to talk about was just like, I never could have imagined this reality. It's absolutely bizarre and wild. If you watch the podcast on YouTube or on Spotify, now that we have that feature where we can release the video footage on Spotify too. I'm recording this in a new apartment, so it probably looks a little bit different. And it's just like crazy. I have a full-time career out of this. That's what I mean by like, I never could have imagined this reality. Even 2 years ago at this point in 2023, February 24, 2023, I definitely was not set on taking even a gap year at that point. I didn't think that it was possible or a reality. And so 2 years later, I guess like 600 days later, to be living in a reality that I make more than enough, have a full-time job through my passion, am able to buy nice things, provide for people who are meaningful to me in my life, to be able to go to places, travel across the US for work, have conversations with people I looked up to growing up. Some of that stuff is just like, truly could have never imagined it. And God is so good. And I think it's always a reminder to like follow his plan, follow his will, because it is greater than your own. And again, 2 years ago, I was like so set on getting into Stanford and Notre Dame, and thought I had a good chance at getting into one of those. And to me, that was like the best reality possible. But at the end of the day, the best reality possible was actually being able to make this dream become a reality and to be able to do this at a full-time capacity. I just didn't see the path at the time. And then when I got rejected from both, it was like panic mode. And it was trusting in God, like, okay, his plan is greater than my own. And ultimately that's what ended up happening, is like, this reality was so good and better than Stanford or Notre Dame. If they called me today and were like, you get free admission, full ride, I would be like, I'm good. Like, this is the dream. Wouldn't want anything else. So if you are applying to colleges or a job and like things aren't going the way you may have hoped, I think you're going to look back a year or 2 years from now and be like, everything was fine. Take a deep breath. Everything works out how it's supposed to. And every experience molds you into the type of person that you need to be. And I'm just so grateful for this reality that I'm walking in. It's utterly insane. And I can't wait to see all the things that God does in my life and through this platform and through this company. And just, blows away my expectations. That was a prayer going into this year. Like, God, I pray that bigger things might happen than I could even expect. And I'm excited to see those things, what those things are, and those things come to fruition. I also want to give like a super brief recap to how the podcast started, because I get this DM a lot. And honestly, I just want to say it on an episode so that I can like send this episode to those people. Because a lot of times you get so many DMs asking the same question and it can just get repetitive, answering the same thing over and over again. But basically how the podcast started, youngest of 6 kids, was born in Erie, Pennsylvania. At the time, at least, of living there, I'm not sure if it's changed. We got like the most snowfall in inches out of any U.S. city. I was also like homeschooled at the time. I was super young. I was 5 years old. And so my parents wanted to get us out of the house, get us moving so that like we weren't in the house 24/7 in the cold winter months. So we had a YMCA like 2 miles from our home. We would go, I think 3 days a week. They'd wake us up at 6 a.m. Wild stuff from my parents, but I guess go them. It got me into the sport of running, so I guess I'm grateful. But 6 a.m., 3 days a week, we go to the local YMCA and we'd run for 30 minutes. And it was an upstairs track, 20 laps to a mile. I remember it very, very vividly. And that was the first thing I was ever better at than my 3 older sisters, and my 2 brothers kind of egged that on. So at that point, at 5 years old, you only care about what you're good at. And so at that point, I was like, running's my thing. Like, I'm really good at running. So continue to explore it. I think in kindergarten was like when I could officially start competing, was good then. And then all throughout middle school, my final year living in Pennsylvania, won the city championship in 2nd grade, thought I was hot stuff, moved to Toledo, Ohio. And at that point, Toledo was just like the competition was much better and was still decent, but I wasn't like putting in the time or effort that it really required to like be really good at the sport or like take my running to the next level. I think in about 6th grade, I was fed up because top 3 at the city championship got medals. And I think I got like 4th. And I was like, I'm sick of this. I need to put time and effort to actually get a medal and like see what I'm capable of. So I started going to the library, getting out all sorts of books about the sport of running, convinced my mom to let me get an email, started finding emails of popular coaches and athletes, even like a Clayton Young back in his BYU days before he won an NCAA championship, like found his email, cold emailed him. And basically I just asked like, how do I get good at the sport of running? And those people would help me. They would help me write training, what shoes I should wear, what nutrition I should have. And through that process ended up winning my city championship in 8th grade. And at that point was the first thought that occurred of the sport of running is so massive. Most people are not going to go to the lengths of like emailing coaches and athletes or going to the library and reading dozens of books about the sport of running and training theory. Why isn't there a central resource and platform that has this resources that's more readily accessible? I love the quote, create things that you yourself would want to see or want to read or want to hear or want to listen to. And that was the case for the running effect. I was like, this is something that I wish I had in 8th grade, but it doesn't exist. So I'm going to create that. And for you out there, if there's something out there that you really wish existed, create it. Like, be that person. There are probably a whole lot of other people out there who also want that thing or also need help with that thing. So had the idea of starting the podcast for the first time in 8th grade. And then it took me 2.5 years to act on it. Started the podcast July 17th, 2020 was my first ever episode with Alex Osberg, the man, the myth, the legend, literally mentor, friend. He's been on the podcast so many times. Absolute legend. Love all of those conversations. Go check those out if you haven't. Some of the best of the best on this podcast, or go back to episode 1, pre-puberty Dominic, or probably in the thick of puberty. My voice was hilarious. Had no clue what I was doing. Like, had a list of questions, just like terrible. But I guess at my age and for a first episode, you know, it is what it is. It's funny and fun to look back on. But anyways, started the podcast, July 17th, 2020, going to my sophomore year of high school. And a similar thing happened within the podcast that happened within my running, which was like I was doing it, but I wasn't necessarily seeing results, but it wasn't about the results. I was just thrilled to be able to talk to the people that I wanted to talk to. Was so happy about that. But I think I hit a point about a year and a half, 2 years in, similar conversation to myself that I had with running of like, I'm doing this, but I'm not maximizing it. How do I maximize it? Because I'm the type of person, I'm not just going to do something to be okay at it. I'm going to do things to be the best, to be great at it. So started going to the library again to get out books about marketing. Actually got on social media. I wasn't on Instagram for the longest time. And a lot of people don't know this. I've actually never, the only Instagram account I've ever had is at The Running Effect. I only got on Instagram for the podcast, for the business, which is quite funny. And that's probably how it'll always be. So yeah, got on Instagram, started marketing the show, went from a cadence of like an episode every 2 or 3 weeks to then an episode every week, and then an episode 3 times a week. And now what we do, the cadence and what we've done for over a year now, like an episode every other day. And with that, the results just kind of naturally came. And then ultimately got rejected from the schools that I wanted to. Moved to Austin, Texas for a gap year. Within like 2 months, things were just going well. And kind of at that point made sense to go full time. It's a super brief story of how the podcast started. Something I do want to state, and I want you guys to take away from this conversation, regardless of what you're in, whether you want to start a podcast or make it far within the sport of running. Big point here. I was able to make it 500 episodes because I was never in it for the metrics. My editor, Isaac, shout out Isaac, he'll be editing this. I actually texted him like a few weeks ago and was like, hey man, this is going to be such a monotonous task, but can you count how many episodes we're on? Because I had no clue, and I like had an inkling that we would probably be close to 500. And again, I wanted to celebrate that amount when we got to it, but I genuinely had no clue. I think I stopped counting officially after 100 because I just genuinely love the podcast. I'm never in it for the metrics. I'm in it for the quality of conversation, what the podcast brings me, what it brings others, the value it brings others. And he counted to like 474. So for literally 374 episodes, I had no clue what amount we were at. And it'll probably get to the point between 500 and 1,000, maybe 750 that I don't count because I don't do it for the metrics. Even on Instagram, we have 215,000 followers, but like that's not why I post. Like, sure, it's a cool number. Sure, it's cool to know people follow me. But at the end of the day, you can't be in things for metrics if you want to be successful. You have to be in it because you love it, because it brings others value, because you have passion for it. If you're only in it to hit 500 episodes, you'll be gone. And there's this crazy stat I've shared on the podcast before that 90% of podcasts quit after episode 3. Of those that survive, that 10% that survive, 90% of those quit after episode 21. So if you post 22 episodes, you're in the top 1% of podcasters all time. So many people want the results, the flashy things. Very few people are in it for the right reasons. And the people that are in it for the right reasons are the ones who make it to 500 episodes. And for me, myself, again, going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, I started this podcast because I wanted to create something that wasn't out there that I myself found value from. That's why I created it. It's honestly why I continue to do this, because I know it brings others value. I know it's the type of thing I would want to see out there. And that's why I was able to make it 500 episodes, is because my intention is true and clear and rooted in something solid and rooted in a selfless desire to help other people, and not, I get free shoes from Hoka and Nike and On and make X amount of dollars and get constant external validation from people because they follow me. Like, could care less about those things. I have too many shoes in my closet. If you're a size 11 and a half, reach out to me. Yeah, just like, that's not why I'm in it. And I think that's why I've been able to make it so far. So even for you, like if you're a runner and you really want to make it to the Olympics, but the Olympics is the only reason you're running, you will never make it to the Olympics. I will die on my grave on that take. Every Olympian I've talked to on this podcast has made it to the Olympics genuinely because they love the sport of running and they have fun with it. So many of my guests, it honestly gets repetitive, but I get why they say it. Like in my question about like towards the end of conversations, you know, what's your final takeaway message for the audience? So many say like, have fun with the sport. And I think they genuinely say that because my iPad died. Can't talk. My iPad died with my notes on it. RIP. But yeah, I think they say it because like they know that they got to where they are because they love the sport and they have fun with it. And with that, you're just going to have a greater desire to work hard and to do it. And by doing it, you get really good at it. So be in it for the process and for deep reasons. Be rooted in those reasons. Don't do it for the external outcomes. I think my great goal and mission of the Running Effect is to bring greater storytelling to the sport of running. I'll keep this point brief, but I just want to brush over it and talk about it a little bit to bring you guys up to speed if you're not familiar. And I think it's important, and I want you guys to be aware of what I'm trying to do in the mission. I say this on meetings all the time, but I don't think I've really shared it on the podcast before. Track and field is the second most watched sport in the Olympics, like even above basketball, which is like technically the NBA when it's not the Olympics. A little different. If you're a basketball fan, don't come at me, but similar enough. Track and field is the second most watched sport right behind gymnastics. People care about the sport for 1 out of every 4 years, but the general public doesn't understand and know that it exists those other 3 years, and that there are marathons and all sorts of exciting things going on the other 3 years. And so for me, I want to create a platform that hosts and talks about and tells the stories of those people within the sport of running. There's a reason I've never done a solo episode before this one, is because it's all about the people in the sport. It's all about making them the hero and storytelling their stories. And I love running podcasts. I listened to many before I started my own, but they were always very niche. Like there's a women's running podcast. There's like a mile split for high schoolers. There's like a more like pro-centric podcast, like Citius Mag, but there's very few that are like top down, like pro, college, high school, every single individual at the peak of like the best of the high school, best of the college, best of the pro world. And then some like unique stories of people who are like super corporate, like a Nicholas Thompson, CEO of the Atlantic, but he happens to run, and like telling all of those stories. And that's what I'm so passionate about, is like telling the stories of those within the sport. One, because it's fascinating. Two, because no one's doing it. And three, because it's just such an untapped market. Like running, again, massive, second most watched sport in the Olympics. Look at world marathon majors. Like New York City Marathon is debatably the biggest day in New York City. Like 60,000 people run the streets of New York, maybe like 55,000, something around that number. You can fact check me. And they shut down the whole city for it. Like everyone is a fan of the sport of running that day. And there's really no central source like telling the best of the best stories within the sport of running. So that's my goal. I want to have on the Jakob Ingebrigtsen, but also the George Bush, who was the first president to run a marathon. Like all those, or a Tom Cruise, who's like known for his running scenes in movies, to like Noah Lyles, or a Mondo Duplantis. Like I want to have a platform that you go down the list and catalog of episodes, and it's like really unique individuals within the sport, from like the Jakob, who wins gold medals and is my favorite athlete and like debatably going to be the best to ever do it, to like Kendrick Lamar, who I've heard just casually jogs. Can you imagine how hard a Kendrick Lamar episode would go? Just talking about running, not even his music. Like, tell me about your running routine. What you like would be sick. And that's what I'm striving for. That's my goal. I want to be the one-stop shop of storytelling in the sport of running. And I think that's where the podcasting company is going. It's like, how do I get on those dream guests? How do I make the quality of conversation that I have as high as possible? And I'm really, really excited about continuing to build out that vision. And again, it's just like, I'll inevitably be successful if I do an episode every other day for another 3-4 years. Like, you guys may think I'm successful. I'm just scratching the surface. And I still feel like I'm like in my rookie year. I'm constantly trying to get better, constantly trying to make the conversations better, the marketing better, the look better, everything better. And if I continue to have that 1% better mindset every single day, I know we're going to get there. And I know that like eventually we're going to get to the point where like Kendrick Lamar, his team's coming to me. I don't have to go to him. That's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. I definitely want to do more in-person podcasts. I think that's like necessary. Difficult thing with running is just like runners are so spread out. I can't fly them out to Columbus. Like, they're in the thick of their training. It's also costly, expensive. We're not quite at that point yet. So definitely want to be more intentional this year about finding those opportunities that I can like bulk record in person. Because it's just the energy of an in-person podcast is nuts. It's so good. Quality of conversation is amazing. The best of the best. And then it's just like really fun, and watching it, it's just like so quality, so crisp. And the podcasts I've done in person, like the Zach Levitt one I did a few months ago, is a great example. It's just like a cinematic experience. So I definitely want to do more in-person podcasts. I want to refine my approach on social media. If you followed me on Instagram, you'll know like over the past few months, would do a lot of like inspirational reels. Love that sort of stuff. Really fun. But the podcast is like my first love. It's what I'm passionate about, and I want to direct more people to those. So what I've started to do now is like, instead of taking clips from other podcasts or other like talks or whatever, those clips are now directly from my own podcast, and they probably won't perform as well, and that's okay. But I would way rather have like 200,000 really dedicated followers and like tribe members who feel like they're a part of a community and want to listen to the conversations I produce, rather than like 500,000 followers of people who like followed me for different reasons of different things I posted. So I'm really trying to refine my approach on social media and just like constantly get better at everything I do. Funny thing, and maybe not worth mentioning, but I will. Again, this is a yap session, and I hope I'm entertaining you on your run or while doing the dishes or whatever you do. Kind of how I describe what I do is like 3-pronged. It's like podcast number 1, social media number 2, event marketing number 3. All 3 kind of like weave into each other, right? Like in event marketing, we create pieces on the ground, but then we use number 2, social media, to like produce those pieces. Or sometimes 1 and 3 match up, where I like host a live panel at an event, and like event marketing and podcast then crossover. So there's crossover within all those 3 aspects, but that's kind of what I boil the company down to. And when people ask what I do, I'm like, I own a sports media company, and then I kind of break down those 3 prongs. I'd say podcast is what I'm most passionate about. It's my first love. It'll probably be the thing I do even past the end of the running effect. Like, love event marketing, not the biggest fan of travel. Could see me dropping that one day. Social media will probably always exist because you have to have a platform to, promote the podcast. But even if you follow me on Instagram, it's so funny. Sometimes I'll go to events and like kids have no clue what I look like because I don't publish my face much, which I honestly kind of love because I never want it to be about me. But yeah, social media is like not my favorite thing. I love the conversations. That's my favorite thing. That's what I'll probably continue to do for quite some time. wrapping up this this conversation between me and you here, something I really want to state is you all have a running effect idea within you. Like I said before, had the idea of starting the running effect. In 8th grade, took me like 2.5 years to act on it. I don't wish that I started it earlier because I think everything happens when it's supposed to, but it took me quite a while to act on it. And you have an idea within you, you just don't act on it. And one of my favorite quotes that I came across last year, it was a question: do you know where the most valuable piece of real estate is? Graveyards, because there are billion-dollar ideas sitting in the ground from people that never took action. Key line here: procrastination is the assassination of all destinations. You have these big ideas, you have these big dreams, you're just too scared to act on them. You're scared of what other people will think of you. You're scared of if you fail. You're scared of the risk. You're scared of what so-and-so will say about you. And it's like, it doesn't matter. We're all going to die one day. You're so fine. Do something epic with your life. And minimally, if it fails, I remember saying this about the running effect, like very early on before I even started it. Like, if it fails, I will have had really cool conversations. I will have like taken action on something cool. And most importantly, I won't live with regret that I never explored this opportunity. I could be a sophomore in college right now at the Ohio State University, go Buckeyes, and have in the back of my head, like, oh, what if I had started that podcast and had public conversations with those people I was privately talking about and marketed, like, and made a full-time job off of it, and like all the things I'm living now, I could totally see myself beating myself up thinking that could have been a reality if I took that action. Don't get to that point. Don't live with regret. It's way better, way better. And studies show this. Like, the regret from action is way less than the regret from inaction. And I firmly believe that God has planted a dream in your heart, in your mind, an idea within your heart and your mind. And that's why my motto is turn your what ifs into realities. What if I dedicate myself to running more? What if I start a podcast? What if I start a food pantry within my community and help the homeless people in my city? What if I start a lawn care business with my buddies this summer, or a YouTube channel with my buddies this summer? Like, no one cares about what ifs unless you turn them into reality. And you yourself, the type of person you want to be, is the type of person who takes action. Like, obviously there's the funny saying, like the dad lore thing, but like, actually go create some good dad lore. Like, go take action. If you fail, you fail. You'll be a better person in the process. You'll have some good stories to share. I love this quote as well. The only reason you're not living the life you actually want to live is because you, day by day, keep on feeding the life that you don't want to live. And you need to stop feeding into the routines and habits that make you who you are if you aren't satisfied with your current results. If you're not happy with your results in running, with your results in life, with your relationships, stop feeding into the habits and routines. That's what makes us who we are. The reason the podcast is successful, you break down my day, it's because I do the things that it takes to have a successful podcast. I focus on marketing. I figure out how to be better at marketing. I post X amount of time. Like, my routines and habits naturally line up. You'd be like, you read the routines and habits of myself, you don't even see my name. You could just assume the results that are going to come from that. That's the same thing with your running in your life. If you're not satisfied with that, you need to do a personal audit of your routines and habits. Fix those things, you'll fix your results. And then the last thing I'll say, so many people, including myself back in the day, and even I have to catch myself from time to time falling down this path, like comparing yourself to someone else's path and wanting to fit in and be normal. But the thing is, if you want to be extraordinary, if you want to do extraordinary things, you're not gonna have a normal life. Break down the definition of normal. It means that it's normal, that like it's like everyone else, but exceptional is you're an exception, right? And so if you want to have exceptional results, you have to have a life that's an exception. One of my favorite quotes, another quote, me quote guy, that I came across last month, I think: if the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. The clear path is the safe path. It's well marked and well lit. But if you want more out of life, you have to leave it behind, enter the woods and carve your own. And again, you only have one life. Go do something epic with it. Go turn that what if into reality. Go try to make the Olympics and fail, because then you can say, I tried to make the Olympics and I failed. Go try to win a state championship and fail, because then you can live knowing that, like, I did everything I could to win a state championship, and the person I am as a result is amazing. Like, for me, I'm not going to lie. I had those dreams in 8th grade of like winning a state title, setting state records, going D1, making the Olympics one day, getting a pro contract with a company. And it obviously didn't happen, as you can tell by me having a podcast and being kind of washed if you follow me on Strava. But like through that pursuit, I tried. I really tried. Like I ran 65 miles a week, crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and it didn't happen. But the person I became and the attributes I gained from trying to be a state championship and go down that path ultimately gave me the attributes I needed to be successful within the endeavor of running a company and a podcast. And so again, when you look back on your life, it all makes sense. In the moment, it doesn't. You panic. You're like, oh, it sucks. I never panned out. Wasn't really that good at running. But in hindsight now, I'm like, oh, it gave me the attributes I needed, like patience, like hard work, like dedication, like networking to be successful within this new endeavor, podcasting, running a company. So go try and fail. And I came across this quote also last month, and I think it's honestly so jarring, but because of that, it's so good. It's from Alex Hormozy, who, going back to Alex Osberg, we always bring him up on the podcast when we do conversations with each other. Alex says, at your funeral, friends and family will argue over who gets your belongings. People will talk about the food in the venue. Your life will be summarized in 2 to 3 paragraphs. Conversations will shift from your life to their lives. Your friends will drive away thinking about what's next on their to-do list. Some people won't be able to make it because, quote, something came up. And most people you know today won't even be there. The balloons thing cracks me up if you're watching this. I don't know why that happens. And most people you know today won't even be there. You're going to die. People will move on, in parentheses, in weeks, not years. Do what you want. Stop caring about what other people think of you. Stop caring if you're going to fail. Again, as that said, like most people you know today won't even be at your funeral, will not care what you did with your life. And yes, that's a hard, stark reality, but I think there's a lot of freedom in that to do what you want and to feel the freedom to carve out your own path. So wrapping up this chill and yap sesh with Dominic Schlueter. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening, whether you're from episode 1 or episode 500. My gosh, that would be crazy. If this is your first time ever listening to the podcast, shoot me a DM. This is not a regular episode, but thrilled to have you here. Appreciate your support. So excited to go with you guys, make this platform better. It's my promise that every single day I approach this as a craft, trying to get 1% better every single day so that I can produce the best possible product that can impact you, your community, your friends, your team, and yeah, create something that's never been seen in the running world before. That's what I'm working towards. So many exciting things in the works that I can't quite talk about yet, which honestly, I hate when other people say that on the podcast. Nothing that crazy. I'm just like constantly trying to grow the podcast, work with cool people, do cool things, work on cool projects. And I'm excited to see all of those things come to fruition. But again, you work hard, things happen. And that's how I've gotten to where I am today. That's where I will get to where I want to go. I appreciate you all. I love you all. I sincerely mean those words. The support, yeah, it's crazy. I could get emotional thinking about it. The support from the early years all the way up to present day is crazy. And I probably don't take enough time to sit and realize what I've built, but it's because I just have such bigger fish to fry and know I can do so much more. And that's both unhealthy, but also it keeps me striving and will probably be the thing that unlocks the future results that I want to one day accomplish. So I love you all. Thank you. Share this episode with a friend. Random aside, but a few pieces of merch left. So go cop those. We only made 200 pieces. So a super exclusive drop. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Let me know if you guys ever need anything. And I sincerely mean that. DM me if you ever need anything. Email me if you ever need anything, have any questions, any feedback for the podcast, even if it's like, dude, you're terrible at this. Always here for constructive criticism or a good laugh in the case that it's not constructive at all. It'll just be screenshotted and shared in the group chat somewhere, LOLing. And yeah, you guys are great. Let's see. Next podcast should be Cooper came out yet today as of recording this. This will come out. And then, gosh, I'm trying to think. Oh, Emily Mackay, Olympian and super fast 1,500 meter runner from the U.S., bronze medalist at the World Championship indoors last year. That will be the next podcast that comes out. And probably won't see you guys for a while one-on-one. But this was fun. And I hope I helped your run go by fast. Keep crushing it. Genuinely. Want you guys to succeed in life. And want this podcast to impact lives to the point where you guys are creating and doing your own things and then saying the same message that I am, which is like, turn your what ifs into realities to all those in your life. And you guys do something really cool. People ask you how you did it, and you say, I took action on that dream. Be that person. Do epic things with your life. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you all. I will see you in the next one. Love you guys. Peace out.